Hello, everybody, and welcome to the February update of the Disneyland Magical Audio Tour. And I'm joined once again with Brian. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Chris. Happy Valentine's Day.
I don't know.
Glad to be here.
I've always been focused on holidays. I don't know, ever since grade school. At one time I wanted to be a teacher. Maybe that has something to do with it. Like a grade school teacher.
Oh, yeah. And you could have had Valentine's exchanges in your class with all those chalky heart candies and stuff. Yeah.
Be mine and...
Yeah. I love you too.
Yeah.
Be true to your school.
Well, speaking of Valentine's Day, on February 14th, it will be Valentine's Day. And all month long on DisneyChris.com, my song of the day each day will be a Disney love song. It's Love Month over at Disney Chris. But if you don't celebrate Valentine's Day, just for you, Happy President's Day, because that's happening in February also. And I remember when we had 2 days off. We had Lincoln's birthday and Washington. Now they combined them.
Yeah, they do that sometimes.
So I just want to mention before we get into the update that if you have not thought about it yet, well, think about it. Patreon is a way that you can help support all of the work and all of the blood, sweat, and tears and love that I put into not just my podcasts, but also, which Brian is a part of, but also my website. And I'm not asking much. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support what I do.
Do it.
Because it helps me be able to continue to bring you magic, and also it's mutually beneficial, because even for as low as $1 a month, you receive special rewards, audio content, and special commentary videos, and a exclusive podcast only for subscribers. So think about it.
Yeah, we just recorded a really fun Down the Rabbit Hole yesterday, Chris and I. So if you want to hear that, subscribe. Be a Patreon subscriber. Do it. Do it now. 3, 2, 1.
And to
go
do
to that
so,
website.
go to www.patreon.com/DisneyChris. Another way that's very helpful, that's mutually beneficial, is to go to our online store, where you can purchase 2 different designs that represent the Disney Chris Magical Audio Tour and the podcast, your choice. And it comes in all different types of merchandise, like t-shirts, mugs, notebooks, stickers, handheld vacuum cleaners. What else, Brian?
Beach towels.
Miniature rocket ships.
Notepad, journals. Balloons.
Dog cages. I hope you all know I was kidding, and those aren't actually available. I just want to not get your hopes up high for a Disney Chris dog cage.
At least a notebook or something. That's
but
what
Brian, everything Brian said we do have.
Yeah, except for the Mini Coopers, we don't.
We do have, as you can see, electric guitars and laptop computers. No, those are just stickers you can put on. So to get to our store, go to jcpodcast.threadless.com. And that's it for the plugs. We're keeping the plugs short as per request. So we're going to get right into the audio tour now. And if the music hasn't given it away yet, the chapter that I worked on throughout January was The Rivers of America. Do you want to read what it says, Brian, about the Rivers of America?
Yeah, sure. The Rivers of America, Frontier River Excursions, where we climb aboard a Mississippi sternwheeler or set sail on a proud three-masted windjammer for a scenic journey down the Rivers of America, Rivers of America's historic past. From here, we can relive Tom and Huck's frontier adventures in a region filled with nature's many wonders. Ooh, I like that. Let's go.
So, I had previously worked on this chapter about 6 years ago. Actually, no, 8 years ago, 2014. I had 50 tracks, and the chapter at that time was completed. So, out of all the chapters that I worked on, this one required probably the least amount of work, because basically what I was doing is adding new things and also cleaning up stuff that I edited 8 years ago, because I have better software, better tools for cleaning audio than I did 8 years ago. And I've also acquired more skills over time. So I've gone back and made improvements on a lot of existing tracks because it's been a while. And also I added a bunch of things that I have obtained since I initially redid this chapter. So this chapter is slightly different. A lot of the tracks I'm going to talk about are redo tracks that are not anything new, but they are improved. So I'll tell you what all that's about.
Redo.
So let's start at the beginning. It's a very good place to start. And here's the chapter.
Chapter 9, right? Not chapter 1.
Chapter 9. The Rivers of America. Now, so the first track.
This is one of my favorite chapters, by the way. I really love it.
Some of the tracks are not 8 years old, but I had already added them, over time. But I'm only going to talk about the ones I worked on in January. And otherwise we'll be here all night. So the first track I worked on is a redo. And some of them are redos, but I made changes. And some of them are redos, but it was just cleanup. And you'll know when I tell you which is which. So the first one is a redo, but I made changes. I added more music to this. What this is are, originally it was 2, but now it's 3 different instrumentals used during the, the Walt Disney anthology programs when they were showing the Rivers of America. So it's basically 3 different theme songs that you probably will recognize if you've ever watched the old, anthology shows. And they represent the Columbia and the Mark Twain and everything like that. So that's what this is. I cleaned up what I had already worked on, and I added additional music to this, so it's longer now. So this section was basically done. This is all television audio taken from different TV programs and things. That had all been completed. This one is new. It's not a redo. It's Disneyland Records, A Trip Aboard the Mark Twain. Do you know the album Walt Disney Takes You to Disneyland? Brian?
Yeah, absolutely I do. I just bought it.
So this is
the actual
audio
album, not the reissue in the 2005 50th anniversary music set, but the original.
Did you know there was
1956
actually a 19 56 reissue shortly after the original. The 56,
is that the one, A Day at Disneyland, with Jiminy Cricket narrating?
Yes,
that one?
it's the same audio. Some of the music was cut for time, and then they added the voice of Cliff Edwards describing things as Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, that one's fun. I like that cover too. It's cool.
That's the version that I have here, and it's just the point on the album where you're going on the rivers of America with Jiminy Cricket. So that's awesome. What that is. Okay, so the Mark Twain Steamboat, I have several different versions over time because the narration changed over the years. So I have several different versions, and I believe the very first version is this version, and you're saying yourself, but the park opened in 55. Yes, but I don't think they used recorded narration until 1969. Before that, there was no narration. You just went around the river, and that was it. They had live music sometimes. They still do, but this is the original. Now, this one, I went back and listened to all of them, and believe it or not, even though I worked on this 8 years ago, I didn't need to make a single correction. It was perfect as is, so I didn't change number 13 at all. But all the other ones, I found tiny little glitches. So all the other ones, number 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, I made minor corrections to. But I didn't mark them as new because the actual track itself is the same. I just removed glitches or clicks or little problem things that don't affect the running time and don't affect the actual program of the track itself. So I didn't mark them as new.
Or the sound of a kid hurling over the side of the Mark Twain.
Or like the water makes like a crackle sound or something. Okay, so anyway, the Mark Twain Leadsman depth mark calls is something newly added. And this is just that little thing at the beginning of the attraction where you hear, Mark 1, Mark Twain, without any music or sound effects. So it's all the other versions I have of that have the sound of the steamboat whistles and bells, and this version is just the audio without any sound effects or music. So the next thing that I added new, just like I added this without any sound effects or music, I decided to add a version of the narration without any sound effects or music. So that's what this is. It's just the straight audio of the narration without any steamboat sounds or, ambient sound effects. So that's new. Plus, I actually added the current version of the Mark Twain Riverboat, which began being used in 2017 when they reopened after the remodel of the Rivers of America. So this is the current day version that I was able to add. This is brand new as well. So we have an additional ride-through, improved versions of the others, and then 2 isolated tracks with just the narration and depth marking calls. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions?
I wish I was on the Mark Twain right now riding.
So the next
That's not a question.
The next track is just the sound effects by themselves. All the various sound effects that you hear going around the river, a lot of them are no longer heard. They're no longer being used, but the sound effects that have been used over the years, including the crackling fire of the burning cabin, the native village, different things like that. without any music or sound effects. You hear all that stuff on these steamboat excursion tracks, but you also hear the steamboat sounds and the narration. These are just the sound effects by themselves. Does that make sense?
Sounds of the river. Yep.
So the next track is Songs to Cruise the Rivers of America by. I years ago saw somebody post a little collection online that you could download called Music to Ride the Monorail By. And that inspired me to create other mixes for other things.
Or music to buy
songs to
by?
do songs to do this by. I have several throughout the website, and this is one that I created just for this chapter called Songs to Cruise the Rivers of America By, and it's an hour and 45 minutes. And
wow.
It is all different songs about rivers. So it's got like stuff that's like old folk songs up to like 70s. I didn't really get into modern stuff because it's not my cup of tea. But like, so I have...
Sounds like you got Proud Mary in
I
there.
do have Proud Mary.
CCR.
I have Proud Mary. I have Down by the Lazy River by the Osmond Brothers. River. I have the old songs like Swanee River and Shenandoah and Waiting for the Robert E. Lee. And I have the song from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by the Sherman Brothers, the river song from that movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So that's what that is. Back. It's a whole hour and 45 minutes of songs about rivers, American rivers specifically. And then I have the actual audio that was heard during the reopening ceremony of the Mark Twain Steamboat when it reopened after they had closed it to make room for Galaxy's Edge, and they redesigned the Rivers of America. They had a big reopening ceremony in July of 2017. This is the actual audio that you would hear as this fella, who's the president of Disney Parks at the time, was standing at this podium. It's actually him speaking. And I cleaned up the audio. It was a little rough. I added music and sound effects and cleaned it up and made it real nice. And he also gives a shout out to, what's his name, that he had just passed away when the opening ceremony happened. And he mentions him. The guy that wrote all of Walt's speeches.
Oh, remember? Marty Sklar.
Yeah, he gives a shout out to Marty Sklar during this as well.
That's nice.
Then I have the this is something I created. I listened to the actual audio when the Mark Twain Steamboat reached this new bridge. It was timed so that the railroad went over it at the same time, and they shot off fireworks as the reopening of the railroad. And so they actually had the Disneyland band on board playing live music. They played You've Got a Friend in Me, and then they played When the Saints Go Marching In. So I found two band versions of both of those songs, and I added the sound of fireworks. The reason they played You Got a Friend in Me is because, what's his name was on board the train. The guy...
Tom Hanks?
No, the guy the artist that was that worked for Pixar, that's no longer working for them anymore. It was before the scandal happened.
Do you want me to say his name or no?
You can say his name. I can't. I want Lasseter? You to. Yeah, here it is. John Lasseter. He was on the train. That's why they played.
Oh, okay.
You Got a Friend in Me. Anyway,
I like when Disney does that. That's fun.
So the next track is the new music that they play when you're on the Mark Twain, when you're going through the new section of the rivers of America, which is called the Columbia River Gorge. So this is the actual music you hear when you're traveling through the Columbia River Gorge. I had a live recording of it, and I actually found the actual music because it's like what do you call, commercially available music that Disney just went. They probably went online and purchased it, so that's what I did too. So anyways, then I sort of, as you know, kind of like to add things that have some relation that are in the other parks. So 29 and 30 have been on the site, so I'm not going to talk about them, but track 28 is the narration and music you hear in Walt Disney World when you're riding aboard their steamboat, which is called the Liberty Bell Riverboat. So that's what this is. Moving right along. Do you have any comments, questions, concerns, Brian?
No, I'm just enjoying I'm looking forward to listening to all these. Can't wait. Beacon Joe. Did you talk about Beacon Joe? Well, that's not new. But
that's not new. I skipped it
intentionally.
Another
homage to Disney World, right?
Yes. Feel free in your own free time to go through the chapter and look at the ones I'm not talking about today, because they have been talked about in previous videos. So the next thing is the Frontierland Dock. This is a redo. This is 3 different versions of the song Cruisin' Down the River, which is actually the song they were playing. The Disneyland Band was on board the Mark Twain when it was dedicated in 1955, and this is the song they were playing as it was being dedicated. It's a song called Cruisin' Down the River, which incidentally I have another version of it in this mix,
the
Songs to
Megatrack,
Cruise the Rivers by, yes.
Yeah.
But, so I have a version of it with the Dapper Dan singing it. And then I have a version of it that is like a marching band playing it. That sounds, it's not the Disneyland Band, but it sounds just like the Disneyland Band. But I added an additional version, which is actually a Wurlitzer Orchestrion playing it. Which brings, so there's actually 3 versions of the song now. And I cleaned up the other 2 versions, which were what the original track was. It didn't have the Wurlitzer. Speaking of Wurlitzer, track 32 has a few Wurlitzer songs, because at one time there was a Wurlitzer Orchestrion located in the little boathouse area that you wait for the...
Oh.
Here's a picture of what it looked like. Now it's
I did
inside.
Not know that. So
it's
it was
inside
under the like.
Yes, but after time.
There? Okay.
After time, they moved it into the Golden Horseshoe. It's still there now, but it doesn't work anymore because being outside, it got damaged over time from the weather. That's why they eventually moved it inside, and now they painted it white. But it's on the 2nd floor of the Golden Horseshoe. If you're ever in there, you can see it there. It's more of a decoration now than anything else. Anyway, at one time it used to play music. You could put a quarter in and it would play a song for you while you were waiting for the Mark Twain to come. Or the Columbia. And here I have, I think, 4 songs that have some sort of a tie-in to the Rivers of America or the time period where they had steamboats. I added an additional song and cleaned up the audio that was already in the original version. So there's one more song, which is Waiting for the Robert E. Lee. And it also has like a good... what is it? A Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight, and California Here I Come, and one other song. But that's what that is. Number 33, Mark Twain Disneyland Band Concert. Originally, this was a recording of the actual Disneyland band playing live. I found a video of it that somebody had taken, and I tried my best to clean up the audio, but I was never really happy with it. So what I did is I completely replaced it with the music from the 1956 Disneyland record of the Disneyland band, because they do play several of the songs that they would play on board the Mark Twain on that album. So I just used those songs and redid the track with that instead, because the sound is a lot better. Speaking of sound issues, okay, so I am going to get back to that topic, but before that, number 38 and 39, they are, I'm not going to go into detail because both of these are tracks I added to the New Orleans Square chapter. So it's the exact same tracks for these two different groups that you'll find on the New Orleans Square chapter that have been there for quite some time. I just also included them here. There's nothing different about them, so I'm not going to go into it. But the one that is different, and speaking of cleaning things up, is this Mark Twain Banjo Band. This is a track that also was a live recording originally, but the sound quality was just terrible, and I hated it being on my site. So I spent hours upon hours trying to find sound-alike music that sounded like the same type of band that was this banjo band on the Mark Twain. And it took me forever because all of the banjo music I could find was either the wrong kind of banjo, it was bluegrass, or it was like a full orchestra. It was very hard to find music that was just banjos and wasn't bluegrass. It was Dixieland style banjo, which is called 5-string banjo, for those who don't know. So anyway, that's what that is. So it's a new version, very similar songs to what the old version was, but it just sounds like a clean, crisp recording now.
See, it's work like that you do that makes this a really special project. So I appreciate that.
So tracks 41 through 44 are not marked new, but they are new because I actually did some major cleanup on all 4 of these tracks. The running times are the same, all the music is the same, but I went through each of these and methodically removed various sound issues like clicks and screeches and little things like that throughout all these 4 tracks. And it was a lot of work. I'm not marking them as new because it's the same music and it's the same basic thing as before, but they are definitely vastly improved. One thing that might notice, getting back into banjo music, I need to sort of bring this up because it involves several of the tracks here on this chapter. There are really 2 different styles of banjo. Well, there's really 3 different styles of banjo. There's 5-string banjo, which is generally the type that's used for Dixieland type music. And then there's an earlier type, and I'm not sure what that one's called, so I'm not going to make up a name for it. But it's the one generally used for bluegrass banjo music. But there's the original banjo, which is called a clawhammer banjo, which predates the bluegrass banjo. And clawhammer banjos, from my experience of editing audio, is one of the noisiest instruments that exists. As far as hearing the strings being plucked and the screeching from running your fingers up and down the strings and little clicks and glitches. So this track is basically all clawhammer banjo, and it took me forever. It's a 3.5 minute track. It probably took me 15 hours to clean this up. Because every other musical note had like a little click or glitch because of the really annoying... I love the sound of a clawhammer banjo. I can't stand like the little clicks that it creates. So I cleaned this up. It sounds a lot better. The real problem is string instruments, to be quite honest. Anything that has string instruments is a major headache to clean up for me, because they make a lot of unwanted noises. And the same thing with this Homespun Songs of Vicksburg has a lot of banjo music in it too. So anyway, what's the next thing that I worked on the list?
57. Mouseketeer Meet and Greet.
Okay, I just recently added this new little section here that I'm calling the Magnolia Bowl Bandstand. And do you know the history behind this bandstand, Brian?
Yeah, a little bit. But it was, I think it was in Town Square at one point, and it was kind of obstructing the view to the castle, so they moved it out to what is now New Orleans Square.
Yes, but there's more to it. I'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, originally it was built in Town Square. As a matter of fact, they built a similar bandstand in the Town Square at Disneyland Paris, and that one stayed. Mainly because the castle is a heck of a lot taller than the one was in Disneyland. So the reason they moved it was because you couldn't see the castle, because it was blocking the view. So before the park even opened, they moved it to where the Plaza Gardens is today. Or I guess today it's the Fantasy Fair area. So that's where it originally got moved to. And it stayed there for about a year. And then in 1956, it got moved a third time to a little area between Frontierland and Adventureland that they named Magnolia Park. And this became a little amphitheater area for live performers and such. So this is my little tribute to Magnolia Park and presenting some of the types of entertainment that was featured at the bandstand in Magnolia Park. The Magnolia Bowl is it is a new track. In fact, it was marked new this morning, but I took it off new. The reason it got added earlier than the rest is because this is also on my chapter 14, which I worked on just before this chapter, and I added it basically 1 month ago today, so it got taken off the new, because I added it for this chapter and that chapter at the same time, but all the others were added more recently. But this is still technically new, and it is a just sort of a montage of the different types of music you'd hear. Like I have some Disneyland band, I have like live choirs and different things, all sort of a little mix. Now the next track, one of the things they used this for was for meet and greets. So the Mouseketeers would often come to Disneyland, and this is where they would have their meet and greets. And here's a picture of it. And Annette would come, and the Spin and Marty would come, and Cubby would come and play his drums.
Wow.
Roy,
that would be like a dream come true.
Roy would come and draw pictures, the big Mouseketeer. So I have this little mix here representing the Mouseketeer meet and greets. They also did dog shows. Here's a picture of a dog show. And this is a track I already had on Chapter 1 representing the Kennel-Ration Kennel-Land kennel at the entrance to Disneyland. But now I've also added it here to represent the kennel ration dog shows, because they sponsored the dog shows as well.
That's so cool.
Now, in addition, they would have international performers from different social groups representing different cultures, like Japanese or Mexico or German or whatever. So I have a bunch of songs representing that aspect of the Magnolia Bandstand.
What a busy grandstand. So here's another little piece of trivia for you. That bandstand still exists today.
It does.
At
Marvin
Rogers
Gardens.
Gardens.
Marvin Gardens. Marvin Gardens
Marvin
is from
Gardens.
Monopoly.
No, Rogers Gardens in Corona del Mar.
That's right. They donated it, and it's still there.
Yeah.
Since 1962. It got removed when they started building the treehouse, because basically the treehouse went where this used to exist. And the next track represents the Kodak picture spot. You remember those signs they used to have all over the park?
Yeah, I do.
Well, there was one sign that was basically right where this picture is facing. And so I added the song Making Memories to represent this.
Is that the Sherman Brothers song?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
So Raps at Tom Sawyer Island, I did redo, but it's the exact same thing that was there before. I just removed a few little problems and glitches. And Harper's Mill is new. This is all Clawhammer again. But this one wasn't as problematic, believe it or not. So I didn't have as much trouble with this one. But I did add this. This is the most recent addition, as a matter of fact. I only added it a few hours ago. Even though it's not marked new, it is an improved version of what was there before. What's next, Brian? Is 67 next?
65, Injun Joe's Cave.
Oh, again.
A little bit of work on that one, yeah.
I did a little bit of cleanup, just some minor cleanup. It's the same that was there before, I just did some minor cleanup.
You have a couple more Tom Sawyer Island tracks, 67 and 68. You did some.
Yeah, but I want to mention this track because I do plan to redo this at some point. And I'm going to put it off for a little while and come back to it later. This track is going to take me days, if not over a week. This is all Clawhammer and another notoriously noisy instrument, the harmonica. It's got all the huffing and puffing of someone playing the harmonica, like between chords you hear and I have to get rid of all that, and I know it's going to take a lot of work, and so it is going to get changed. It's going to be exactly the same music that's there now, so you're not missing out on anything as far as what it's going to be, but I do plan to come back and work on that at some point. So the Fort Wilderness Regimental Headquarters is the bugle sounds, you know, like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da type stuff. And then also the sound of the guns that you would shoot from the towers.
Yeah,
and
that music makes me feel like I'm at work.
And the next track is the motion picture soundtracks from 2 movies released in the 90s, based on the novels by Mark Twain, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I think the first book was just
The Adventures of Huck Finn.
The first book was just called Tom Sawyer, and the second book was called The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah.
But these are both books that were made into movies. Jonathan Taylor Thomas played Tom Sawyer in the first movie. He's not in the second movie. That Tom Sawyer is not in the second book. It's all about Huckleberry Finn.
Wasn't Frodo who played Frodo in Lord of the Rings?
I have no idea. I don't think so.
I can't remember his name.
This was a long time ago, so I don't remember. And they're not on Disney Plus. I actually was curious to watch them, but unfortunately the movies are not on Disney Plus. But these are I combined both soundtracks into one track. It runs a little over an hour. It's all the music from both of those films. It's all background music. There's no songs. It's all like instrumental background music. Moving right along, the next track.
We're going to talk about the Mike Fink keelboats. So
this is me. I recorded myself, and I found, I was looking for the script, the spiel for the Mike Fink keelboats, and I couldn't find it posted online anywhere, so I made an inquiry in a Facebook group called Vintage Disneyland, and there was actually somebody who was a skipper on the Mike Fink keelboats, and he had made a video of him and other friends that were also skippers doing all the lines from the Mike Fink keelboats. So he gave me the okay, and I transcribed that video and made a little script for myself and recorded myself delivering the spiel. But you also hear the music and the sound of the motor and the boat and the birds and the water and everything. So it sounds like you're really going around. Now, I had my voice on here before, but the old track just had me doing the beginning, and then it was just the music after that. This is the whole ride from beginning to end. And then the next track is just the music by itself. So it's all 4 songs that were used on the Mike Fink keelboats. All played by what is the next track, the Banjo Kings, which was the group that performed the 4 songs used for the Mike Fink keelboats. And here is a track of a bunch of their other songs. So you can hear some of the other songs not used on the Mike Fink keelboats, but performed by the same group. So that's what track 74 is. And I think the next track is 77, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I love that banjo music. That's why I like this chapter so much.
So
I didn't realize how much work it took you to clean it up, though.
The next track is similar to what I had on here before, but I added more music. And it's authentic Native American ceremonial and war dance music that I found on an album. It's the real deal. You know, it's, like hi-oh, why-oh, hi-oh, that kind of stuff. I don't want to mimic too much. It's not nice, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So that's that. It's similar to what was there before, but I cleaned it up a whole bunch and added additional music, made it a little bit longer. And even though it's very, not like the type of music most modern people listen to today, I just found it very relaxing, believe it or not. Something about it is just very peaceful and relaxing. Anyway, Davy Crockett Explorer Canoes, I worked on today, and I went through and I just I thought it was going to be a whole bunch of work, because I edited this originally 8 years ago. But it turned out to just need a few minor little cleanup things. It's basically exactly the same track. I just removed a couple very, probably even unnoticeable little issues. But this is an authentic audio of a real person, a real tour guide of the canoes. It's him really talking while the people were riding the canoes. I found a pretty clean recording of it. It was a gentleman it was his last time around the river before he was leaving his job. So a friend of him sat next to him and recorded him, and he posted it on YouTube. So I used that to reenact, and I added sound effects and everything and made improvements, added music. Friendly Native Village. I just did some minor cleanup. Again, a lot of this chapter was cleanup. Native American Shaman, the story of the flute. What this is, the audio of this is featured in other tracks throughout the chapter. But this is just him talking, no music, no sound effects. Just the shaman's voice telling the story, and it's the full and complete audio of it. It's from beginning to end. So if you speak the language he's speaking, which I don't even know what language it is, it's a Native American language of some kind, then you'll be able to hear the story that he's telling.
Yeah, you'll understand every word.
Yes. So Fowler's Harbor is next on the docket. In fact, I edited a little bit of it today, but it's not done. It's not changing. I just have cleanup to do. And another really noisy instrument is the squeeze box. What do you call that? There's another name for it.
An accordion?
Accordion. Accordions are really noisy because when they put their fingers on the keys, they click. And there's all this clicking that you hear, and I hate that. So I started working on it. I only got the first minute done, and it took me about 45 minutes to do a minute. So this is going to take a long time to clean because of all that accordion music. And the thing is, with the Mark Twain, it's all about banjos. With the Columbia, it's all about accordions. So two, terrible instruments I have to deal with for this chapter. Anyway. The next track. So this is music that they played when, and I have a video of it from years ago. I don't think they still play it, but when they would back out the Columbia from Fowler Harbor, because they would open the Columbia later in the day. The Mark Twain was running in the morning, and then around noon they'd add the Columbia to the track. But they had to take it out of its parking spot, which was Fowler Harbor, and to do so they had to have it back up into the other track that it would run around. So it's kind of like back up and then forward into the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Kind of like a train does. So when they were doing that, they played this special music from an album released in the 1970, early 70s, released by National Geographic, and it was a bunch of nautical type songs. And I had a copy of the album, but the sound was just awful. It was all scratchy and raspy, a lot of sibilance issues. So this was, I added that 8 years ago. So I found another version of it on YouTube, and then when I downloaded it and listened to it, I was like, this is the exact same thing I already had. Someone had uploaded the same audio to YouTube, and I couldn't find any other versions of it anywhere. So I just went in and cleaned it as best I could and made improvements to it. It also has the sound of like a boat. You can hear like the waves in a boat, like the creaking of a boat, and different nautical sounds. So I added additional nautical sounds on top of what's already on the album to kind of mask some of the sound issues. I feel this is a huge improvement over what I had on here before. So I also added a little bit of additional music to it. So that's what that is. The Wind and the Rigging. Is that next, Brian?
Yep.
Okay, this is music.
This one, so.
This is music that they have been using more recently for the Columbia. It's just a bunch of nautical instrumental music, traditional music, like Away Rio and that kind of stuff. And again, this was already on the site, but I did some major cleanup, and again, a lot of squeeze box. What's it called again, Brian?
The accordion.
Accordion music.
Yeah.
And also
Like
another problem is these also use a lot of guitar, claw hammer, and claw hammer, guitar, and fiddle. 3 other very noisy instruments.
That's right. Well, they were cheap to make back then, and that's why. Well, not the accordion, but those other instruments.
Like, my favorite instrument to edit is the piano, because there's never an issue with a piano. They're like the perfect instrument. Anyway, the sailing ship Columbia grand opening is the audio from the 1962 TV special Holiday Time in Disneyland, where they show how they celebrate the 4th of July, and that they use the 4th of July to open the sailing ship Columbia, even though the whole story they're telling is a complete and utter lie for several reasons. First of all, they show footage of the 1955 circus parade and claim they had a circus parade the day the Columbia opened, which is not true. That was a parade from 1955 when they had the Musketeer Circus. And then they say that they opened the Columbia on July 4th, which is again a total lie, because it opened on June 14th. But, I guess artistic license.
Artistic license, yep.
So that's what this is. This is the opening of the Columbia. So Sailing Ship Columbia, this is the older version of the ride-through with Fulton Burley as narrator, with all the sound effects and the sound of the cannon going off and everything. This has been cleaned up. It was on the site already, but I did some cleanup to it. And then brand new is the 2010 version, which was an updated different narrator, updated version. It's basically the same exact thing as the Fulton Burley version, same music even, except that it's a different narrator, and they cleaned up some of the questionable things that are said, like referring to people as red men and stuff like that. Anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of that cleaning up going on in the parks these days. So.
Well, this was 12 years ago even.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that started it all. Darn nabbit.
Fulton Burley's version, without the sound effects or cannon blasts or whatever, just his speaking is now included as well. This is this track.
Is Tim saying your favorite line?
In the days of wooden ships and iron men. So, Sailing Ship Columbia Below Decks Museum, I just sort of cleaned up and added additional music.
That's still one of my favorite things to do in the park, going down there. I love it.
Lafitte's Tavern is on the docket to be redone. I only have 2 things left to redo, plus that Fort Wilderness, which is going to be done at a later time. But they're not changing, so they're just being cleaned up. So basically, everything is available now. Anything that was missing has been filled in. Anything that I intended to make changes to has been changed. So this is just cleanup. Again, those pesky instruments that make noise. So the next track is, well, these are marked.
Yeah.
These are marked new because I included these in the New Orleans Square chapter and then also added them here. And they're not going to be new much longer. They're going to come out of new status fairly soon. We don't need to go into them because I already talked about them. Go back and listen to the New Orleans Square. So yes, we're on the last one, Brian. Brian's like eager to go to bed. Anyway,
No, I was just saying that the next track is the last one.
So this is
Sorry.
the show announcements that you hear when you're sitting on the cobblestones waiting for the
Yeah,
show to begin.
your
It
butt is
says
starting to hurt really
it
bad.
says, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this evening's performance of Phantasmic will begin in just 10 minutes. For your safety and the safety of, that mumbo jumbo. That's what this is." So I
The lights
added
around
this.
the river will be dimmed.
Right, exactly. So that's everything, and the music just ended. So we
Wow,
made perfect
timing.
timing. So that's it, folks.
That was fun. Like I said, this is one of my most favorite chapters. So I appreciate all the hard work you did. Even getting the click and clack out of the banjos, which I like, by the way. But
It's a pet peeve for sure of
Yeah.
mine. I hate the
It's,
sound of clicky clangy instruments.
you would hate classical guitar.
Yeah, guitars. Oh, I love
Yeah.
guitars. I hate the screeching when they run their fingers on the strings. I hate that stuff. In older recordings, they kind of tried to make it less noticeable, but now they highlight it. It seems almost so that
Yeah, I think it's something people like.
and the more recent stuff is even more difficult to clean for me, believe it or not. Usually it's the other way around. So, just to give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come next, because I am almost done with this chapter. I just have those 2 redos left. That'll take me a couple days, and then I'm going to begin work on another chapter. I only have 2 chapters to go. So, those are Toontown and Frontierland. So, I'm going to do Toontown next. And then the last chapter I'm going to work on is Frontierland. And then I have a smattering of things that I'm going to go back to that I sort of put off because they're more difficult, or I didn't have the materials at the time, or different reasons that there's a handful of tracks that I have from other chapters that I have to go back and do. But once that's done, the whole site is going to be fully updated. I'd say by the middle of the year there won't be any more coming soons on the site for a change. And the project will be done for now. But anytime Disneyland adds a new attraction or a new show or something changes, that maybe they change a area loop or something, I will be following what's happening and make those changes and keep my site up to date over time. That's easy. I'm not playing catch up. But probably the next project I'm going to turn to once this is done is something people have been asking me about for years, and I might start a California adventure tour as a side note. So keep your donations coming, folks. Patreon, 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 because the more content I add to the site, the more expensive it is for me to pay the hosting fees. Every time I add content, the price tag goes up for me. And if I reach a point where I can't afford to, I'll have to stop adding new music to the site. So if everyone could, contribute $1, if enough people contribute, then we can keep the website running, and I won't have to worry about not being able to afford it. So, again, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Everybody.
I was listening a lot.
Yeah, that's fine. It's how you learn.
Yeah,
it's all
thank
new
you,
to
everybody.
you. So I will see you next month, and I probably will have some Toontown stuff to tell you about. So see you in March, Aaron Go Bra, and we'll see you then.
All right. Bye, everybody.